Hi everyone, happy Monday. I hope you're doing well. I miss you and our library and our time together. Catalina from fourth grade, it was lovely to hear from you again this week. My friends, if you would like to send me an email, I would love to hear from you. If you're reading any great books, please tell me about them. I would love to hear it. My email is alibel@douglasps.net. Send me your email. We are still reading our book, Front Desk by Kelly Yang. We are going to try to get through chapter 9, 10, and 11 today because all three chapters are kind of short, but let's see what we can do. If you are coloring while I'm reading, please go get your stuff now or pause this video, but I'm going to get started. Here we go. Chapter 9. I walked home by myself after school, looking over my shoulder as I made the crossing from Meadow Lane onto Coast Boulevard. It was like crossing over into a different world. Back at the motel, I dashed to find my parents to tell them the news that Jason Yao was in my class. But as it turned out, they had other problems to worry about. The washing machine in the laundry room was busted. There was water everywhere, and my dad had foam up to his knees. Quick, he said, pointing to a bucket. Hand me that. I gave him the bucket. It filled in a matter of seconds, and I dragged it out of the laundry room to the parking lot, watching as the murky water spilled onto the ground like a tidal wave. As soon as it emptied, I took it back into the laundry room, fill and spill, fill and spill. When the last of the water was emptied and the laundry room was all wiped down, my parents got on the phone with Mr. Yao. I picked up the receiver in my room so I could listen in. What now? Mr. Yao barked. I'm terribly sorry, but we're going to need a new washing machine, my dad said. What did you do? Did you break it? Mr. Yao asked, annoyed. You idiot. He's not an idiot, I yelled into the phone. Mia, get off the phone, my dad said. I was okay and I put the phone down on the table for a second, then very quietly picked it back up. You're paying for it, and guess what? They're not cheap, Mr. Yao said. Mr. Yao, please be reasonable, my dad pleaded. I didn't break it. I just got here. I've barely even touched it. Well, you must have done something because it's now broken. And if you want a new washing machine, you're going to have to pay for it, Mr. Yao said before slamming down the phone. My mother was so furious after the call she was shaking. That man, she shrieked. But no matter how mad she got, there was no avoiding the fact that we had to get a new washer. Mr. Yao had told my dad right before he got off the phone that it would take several days before it could be delivered. My dad paced back and forth in the living room trying to figure out how we were supposed to live without a washing machine for so long. Every day the tower of dirty towels from the customers was as tall as me. Maybe we could send it out, my dad said, thinking out loud, then quickly shook his head when he thought about how much that would cost. And who would be paying for it? Certainly not Mr. Tightwad. What if we told people not to use so many towels? I suggested. Again, my dad shook his head. We're a motel. We have to have towels, he said. With a sigh, he turned to my mom and said, we're just going to have to wash them all by hand. My mom groaned. On top of all the other things they had to clean. It didn't take long before the laundry room was teeming with towels. There were piles and piles of them sitting in buckets on the floor, hanging on the door. Every time I walked by the laundry room, there seemed to be more of them, like the towels were meeting each other in the laundry room, getting married and having babies. I knew I had to do something, so I went around to all the weeklies and explained the situation. They were all very sympathetic. They vowed to limit their towel usage to one towel a day until the new washer arrived. Thanks so much for understanding, I said to Hank. He and Billy Bob were in Hank's room cooking hamburgers on Hank's hot plate. Not a problem, Hank said, throwing patties onto the pan. They didn't have enough ground beef, so Hank was taking a bunch of saltines and mushing them up. Then he added the ground up crackers to his ground beef. I watched as he shaped the crumbly ground beef mixture expertly into more patties. Wow, it looks just like a real hamburger, I said to Hank. Oh, sure, it tastes like one too, he said, handing me a cooked one. Gingerly, I lifted the saltine burger to my mouth and took a bite. He was right. It tasted just like a real thing, only crunchier. I devoured my burger. I'm sorry you guys have to pay for the new washer, Hank said, as he threw more patties onto the sizzling pan. Typically, Mr. Yao squeezing us. Typical Mr. Yao, squeezing us for every last penny. He handed me another saltine burger. As I chewed, I thought about how nice it was that Hank lumped us together with the Weeklies rather than Mr. Yao. Despite all our efforts, the mountain of towels continued to grow at an alarming rate. There just wasn't enough time to wash all of them by hand every night. That Sunday, I promised to help my dad knock out a bunch of them. We put them into buckets, filling the buckets with water and dumping in the laundry detergents. Then we sat down and scrubbed them by hand until our fingers turned into raisins. Even then, there were still dozens of dirty towels left, so many, in fact, that we soon ran out of buckets. We're going to have to go over to the Home Depot and buy more buckets, my dad said, shaking his hand. Buckets were $4.99 each. That was more than a Big Mac cost, and we couldn't afford those, but I had an idea. I grabbed as many of the rest of the dirty towels as I could, and I ran towards one of the empty guest rooms. Follow me, I said to my dad. I headed straight for the bathroom, where I dumped the dirty towels in the bathtub, ran the water, sprinkled the laundry detergent. But how are we going to scrub them? My dad asked. I grinned at him and started rolling up my pants. As soon as my dad saw that, he smiled and started rolling up his too. We jumped into the tub together, the water sloshing and splashing as the wet towels tickled our toes. We made so much noise jumping and screaming and laughing that my mom came to see what was going on. What are you guys doing? She asked. We froze when we saw her and bracing for a lecture. But then but when I peeked at her face, I didn't find a frown. Scoot over, she said. My mom started rolling up her pants. That afternoon, my parents and I hopped and hopped and hopped, laughing so hard we soon forgot we were washing towels. Chapter 10. 2 days later, the new washing machine arrived while my dad and I were working, as did an unexpected guest, Uncle Ming. Uncle Min wasn't really my uncle. That was just what we called family friends in China. But he had worked in the same hot, sweaty kitchen as my dad last year, and we hadn't seen him since then. How he managed to drive himself to Cala Vista, I have no idea, because smoke was coming out from the hood of his car when he arrived, and the bumper was falling off. And Uncle Ming himself actually looked worse than his car. He had the swollen black eye and bruises all over his cheeks and neck. What happened to you? My dad asked, rushing over to help his wounded friend inside. He led Uncle Ming into the kitchen. Uncle Ming winced as he slid into the chair, like it hurt even to sit. It's a very long story, he said. His thick Beijing accent made me feel like I was back home. He lifted his puffy eyes and peered at my dad. It's good to see you, old friend. My dad gave Uncle Ming a huge hug while I took out his things and put them inside one of the guest rooms. Room 1, the nicest one. When I got back, the two were deep in conversation, talking about sharks of all things. That was weird. I didn't want to disturb them, so I stood in the corridor listening. But why, Ming? Why did you go to the loan sharks? My dad asked. I wasn't planning on it, but then I lost my job, Uncle Ming said, and $100 turned into $500, and before I knew it, how much do you owe them? $5,000, Uncle Ming said. His voice cracked as he said the number. My dad said a swear word in Chinese. What do I do, buddy? They're going to kill me if I don't pay up, Uncle Ming cried. I gasped at the word kill. They both looked up at me and immediately dropped the subject. They didn't bring up sharks or loans again the whole evening. That didn't stop me from thinking about it, though. After dinner, while my parents and Uncle Ming reminisced about China, I slipped out of the back door. Hank wasn't in his room, but Billy Bob's lights were on. I peered inside and saw that the Weeklies were just starting another game of Monopoly. Mia, they exclaimed when Billy Bob opened the door. Come on and join us. I grinned. I love Monopoly. Can I be the hat? I asked them, plopping down on Billy Bob's bed. The hat in Monopoly looked nice. It looked like a rich man's hat. The shoe, on the other hand, looked like a poor man's shoe. You can be anything you want, Billy Bob said, handing me the hat. He selected the race car for himself and the iron for Hank. Fred picked up the wheelbarrow. Quickly, we set up the game. Billy Bob and Fred made me the bank. As we played, I turned to Hank and asked him if he knew anything about loan sharks. Oh, that's nothing you want to get involved with, he said. No, sirree. You want to stay as far away from that as you can from that rabbit hole. He explained that a loan shark was someone who loaned people money with very, very high interest. What's interest? I asked. Interest is like a fee you pay the person for borrowing the money. So if you want to borrow $10 from me, I would say, okay, but you got to give me $12 back. Otherwise, what do I get out of it? So that the $2 is interest, he said. But a loan shark, Billy Bob jumped in, a loan shark doesn't want $12 back. He wants $20 back or even $50 back. $50? I asked. What kind of people would agree to that? Desperate people, he said. People who can't get loans anywhere else. And what happens if they don't pay them back? Hank sucked in air. You don't want to know, he said. I turned to Fred. They'll come and find you, Fred said, beat you up or worse. I felt myself go cold. Just then Hank let out a squeal. Hot diggity dog, will you look at that? I own Pennsylvania Avenue and Park Place. Hank howled with glee. Pay up, Mia. That'll be $50 a night. I handed him $50. Hank took the Monopoly money and kissed it. Someday, Mia, he said softly. Someday. Someday what? Billy Bob asked, chuckling. You'll really own Pennsylvania Avenue and Park Place? Hey, it can happen. If it can happen in Monopoly, why not in real life? Hank insisted. Isn't that right, Mia? I looked at Hank. I had a feeling he was trying to make me feel good, but I thought I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes, too. Right, I said quickly. Chapter 11. Uncle Min stayed for 3 days until he could get his car fixed. With his broken English, he had a hard time communicating with garages, so I helped him call one up that was close by. At first, they weren't so keen to help. When they heard my voice, they said, Sorry, we don't work with toy cars. I called back, and this time I borrowed a line from my customers. I'd like to speak to the manager, I said. In the end, I got the manager to send someone over to the motel to take a look at Uncle Ming's car. The repair guy told Uncle Ming he had a radiator problem. They managed to drive the car over to the garage, where they fixed it for him, but when it came time to settle the bill, Uncle Ming came horribly short. We'd given him $50, which was just about all the extra cash we had, what with Mr. Yao changing the deal and making us pay for the washing machine, but the total bill was $200. So then Uncle Ming tried something crazy. He tried to pay for the rest in coupons. He'd been collecting coupons from all over. There were coupons for free chicken nuggets at McDonald's, free haircuts at Supercuts, and free frozen yogurt. There were even coupons for free foot massages. You can't pay in coupons, the garage manager wailed. What am I going to do with free foot massages? We'll take them, his mechanics blurted out from the back of the garage. Please, sir, Uncle Ming begged the manager. It's all I have. The manager looked at Uncle Ming for a while, and after much deliberation, he sighed. He took the $50 and the coupons, which he distributed to his mechanics. Everybody cheered. I couldn't believe it. We all waved as Uncle Ming drove away. He promised to return soon to pay my parents back the $50. My dad told him not to worry about it and to focus on getting far, far away from the loan sharks. In school that week, Mrs. Douglas asked me to write a short story. I really wanted to write about the loan sharks, but I didn't know if that was too out there. So I tried to look around to see what other people were writing. Next to me, Jason was scribbling furiously, covering his words with his hand as he wrote. I leaned over, trying to peek at his writing, but Jason shifted his body, blocking my view with his arm. Great! Now he had an arm wall. He turned to me and hissed, Stop it! And then he narrowed his eyes at me. Mia, eyes on your own paper, please, Mrs. Douglas frowned. She said it like I was cheating. I opened my mouth in protest and then closed it. I blew at my bangs in frustration instead and plunged my eyes down on the blank page in front of me. Remember, show, not tell. Write what you feel, kids, Mrs. Douglas announced to the class. If you're mad, write mad. If you're sad or you're worried, write sad or worried. I was all of those things. I thought about Uncle Ming and his black eye and the way his voice rose and fell like a curtain when he said, What do I do, buddy? They're going to kill me. But when I put my pencil down onto the paper, do you know what marched onto the page? Puppies and houses. At lunch, Lupe sat next to me picking at her turkey sandwich while I gobbled up my free school spaghetti. Why were you looking at Jason's paper? Lupe asked. You don't like him, do you? Are you kidding? I can't stand him. Good, because he's terrible, Lupe said. You don't even know the half of it, I muttered, shaking my head. So what'd you write about? I wrote about how last weekend my parents and I waited in line at the movies for an hour, and when we finally got up to the ticket booth lady, they were sold out. Isn't that sad? That is super sad, I said, wishing, hoping that one day that would be my super sad. What about you? What'd you do this weekend? She asked. I turned to tell her about Uncle Ming, then thought, nah, she wouldn't get it. That was so beyond the world of movies and trampolines and Shiba Inus. Just played with my dog, I lied. After lunch, we went to PE. We were playing softball that day. Both Lupe and I stood way out in left field, as far from the action as we could, since we both hated sports. Actually, I didn't really hate sports. We just didn't have any medical insurance. And my parents didn't want me taking any chances. What if you break your arm? My mom asked when I started going to school in America. What if a ball comes flying, hits you in the head, and you have to have stitches? Back in China, this would have been no problem, as my uncle was a doctor. Whenever I got sick, he'd come over and take care of me. My uncle always wore his stethoscope around his neck, and when we left for America, he gave it to my dad to take with him. I wish I could take you with me, my dad said to his brother. I'm sure there are doctors in America, my uncle said with a chuckle. It turned out there were doctors, just not for us. So my mom made me promise every morning that I'd stay on the sidelines during gym class. It wasn't always easy to just stand and watch, but now at least I had Lupe with me. Today we were so busy chatting, we didn't even notice when the softball landed right next to us. Lupe glanced at the ball and went right back to chatting. She didn't even pick it up. She must really hate sports. I'm going to stop here, my friends. So I hope you're enjoying our story. Um, we are about maybe a quarter way through. We still have quite a bit more. So I'm going to try to get through more chapters next time we read together. I hope you are doing well. Happy Monday to you. I hope you come back and see me again next week. We're going to read some more books. I am going to try to do some book talks about some of our books in the library, but look for that next time. Have a great week. Send me an email. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.